Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. In my lifetime, I have never thought that I would witness the continued atrocities that have taken place with black men and women. In fact, these killings have left a long-lasting impression on many African Americans, including myself. I can remember waking up in a cold sweat and remembering a dream in its living color, to the point that I had shed tears, wondering how can I protect my sons, even to the point of feeling like I am helpless and I can't protect them from the enemy of my enemy that is definitely not a friend, their skin. This episode of the Median Society delves further into mental health and the stigma within the black community. Please talk to your spouse, children, or a significant other. If you sense something, don't hesitate to work with them to get some help. While African Americans are just as likely to report serious psychological distress, they are less likely to get behavioral treatment. But adult African Americans are more likely to report feelings of sadness, loneliness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than the adult whites their same age. Yet in 2020, 18.6% of white Americans received mental health services, compared to only less than 9% of African Americans. Welcome to the Median Society, Part 2 of the mental health episode. There is a gap between African Americans and mental health. A lot of it stems from years of oppression and systemic practices of racism that say that blacks can take more pain, admonishments, and that the well-being of African Americans should not matter. Speaking with Nicole, I asked the question of what is it going to take to have African Americans be more comfortable with speaking out and to become more comfortable with receiving help.
I think, again, it comes down to having someone that looks like you, talks like you, saying that they do this. I think that one thing that I think is a strong point that I did get from listening to the Breakfast Club and hearing Charlemagne the God always say how important his therapy is in his life. To have someone like him say that is huge because of just how he looks, how he acts, how he talks. And to have someone like that say that, how important his therapist is in his life and to his well-being, that's important. And I think what it means is we as those who don't have a problem with it and embrace it, we have to be more vocal about it. We can't hide it when we go. You know, don't try to change what type of doctor's appointment you're going to if it's your therapist. Say, I'm going to therapy. Because what happens is then you open that conversation, you open that door with those around you to say, oh, well, either they'll come and talk to you about it, or they'll say, oh, well, I figured she's like me. Maybe it's not so bad. And I think more people have to be more vocal about how therapy is in their lives, because there's a lot more people who do it than you believe. And those of us who are in it, explaining how important it is and how it can help is important as well. But it is definitely a generational thing. It's definitely something that, that goes again back to slavery. You don't have a problem, deal with it, and so we've done that and we have got to get out of that.
Do you think that if more people talk about it and open about, hey, I go to therapy, hey, I do this, I do that, do you think it would improve the overall perception of therapy?
I believe that it would.
Okay.
I believe that it would. It just has to be, I kind of liken it, for lack of a better term, about like when I see men getting pedicures, that definitely was something that was not acceptable. But now it's like they do it, it's no big deal. That's like what it is. It's if more people did it, then it would become more commonplace, or admitted that they did it, then it would become more common.
Gotcha.
Many African Americans don't have interaction with parents or relatives telling them to seek mental help. However, each generational dynamic continues to wear the emotions of trauma on their sleeves. It gets transferred from one family member to the next. Ultimately, the cycle does not change. As we delved into the topic, we asked Nicole, what really creates this stigma in the African American community?
Why that is something that's hard to acknowledge, in terms of the feeling or giving permission to be wronged by racism. The reason why that's difficult to accept and acknowledge is because when you do that, you have to acknowledge that you're a part of a problem and that you contributed to a problem that is uncomfortable. No one wants to hear that your thoughts, your actions, your privilege has hurt someone in some way, because oftentimes it's not intentional. Privilege is not intentional. People don't intentionally have privilege, but people have privilege. There's a large segment of society who has privilege. And that is uncomfortable to believe, that you have something over someone just because of how you look. So because of that, when you start to, in order to say that we can develop a trauma or a mental health issue or concern, depression, anxiety, suicide, all of these different things because of racism and because of just being Black in America, that a mental health issue can be a result of that, you have to first acknowledge that there's a problem. And in order to do that, that takes a strong person to admit that there's a problem, because people want to internalize that. And it's hard to do.
With all the stuff that's going on, especially with the COVID and now us barely surviving the Trump administration, how many folks do you think are going to have PTSD because of this? And then of those folks, do you think that they're going to seek help, or are they going to just adhere to the stigma of, oh no, therapy or whatever is bad?
I believe that there will be a large group of people who, yes, because PTSD is the threat, having had the threat or fear of death or harm, and being placed in a situation that triggers that feeling again. That's all PTSD is. And just like, I know for a fact, and I'm a pretty self-actualized person. I won't say self-actualized. I realize I'm more aware of how I feel and when I'm in certain situations. Got a long way to go, but I feel like I am. So I'm more in tune to how I'm feeling and what my triggers are. So I know if I can go to places that I normally go and feel like I got to get out of here because of some group that's around me, and I feel like I need to flee. If I feel that way, I know there's a large segment of America that still feels that way. A lot of little girls and a lot of young women and young boys and older, a lot of people who look like me who feel the same way, who probably don't even leave their house anymore because they don't want to have to deal with it, because it's that traumatic, because you don't know who's next to you. Do I believe they'll go to a therapist? No, because they won't recognize that's what it is. They won't recognize that that's what it is, that is because when we talk about PTSD, we have this image of a veteran who has been to war, or someone who was in a major tragic accident, or in 9/11 in New York, something huge. But those people on the street who watched George Floyd die, if you're a little Black boy, you have PTSD. Trust me.
Absolutely.
Raising African American boys to men, I have been challenged with the goal of helping them maintain their identity in the midst of having friends in each political spectrum. To do this, it's tricky, but the one thing I have always told them is to never suppress how they feel, because it makes their white friends feel comfortable. Nicole had some great information on speaking with our children about the realities of racism under the current administration.
It's interesting that you say that because my middle child had that exact experience where she went to a birthday party and spent a lot of time with one of her friends and family, her family, the other girl's family, last year. Well, it may have been a year and a half ago, and they're really close. And this year, in this last little, before the election, she found the friend found out how much of a Trump supporter her parents were. And she didn't know. And she found out only recently. And she told my daughter, "Oh my God, I found out XYZ." And my daughter came home and said, "Mommy, I was at their house. I was all in their house. I wonder what they were thinking of me all that time. I'm so embarrassed." Now, this was a year ago, and she's traumatized by finding out that she was around that. It's like, well, maybe they didn't think I was Black, or maybe they thought I was, all of these things, all of that stuff that's going on in her head. And I had to basically, as I, recommend other families do, is just have a conversation with your child. Post-election, pre-election, and post-election. It's these past 4 years in general. Going forward, we have to ask ourselves as parents, do we teach our children from the perspective of the way that America should be, or do we teach them about how it is and what will they experience? Because that's two different conversations. And some parents choose to teach their kids from the perspective of how America should be, because they don't want to traumatize them or make them feel, fearful about who's next to them. But then other people say, but you have to prepare them and give them the tools to be able to deal with who is there in front of them, because it's not always going to be easy. And you got to teach them how to deal with that and how to armor up. That's something that as a parent, you have to decide as a Black parent.
Progress and forward movement. You never make advances without a visual perspective. People don't have to act when the truth is not in front of their face. Quote from the Honorable Marcus Garvey: "Progress is the attraction that moves humanity."
Sure.
Let me just say this one thing too, Anthony.
Sure.
In history, throughout our history, any time that there was some movement in a direction that was going to benefit all of us, it was always when the trauma was televised. When they could see the dogs being put on the Black people marching, when they could see the hoses, when they could see Emmett Till's body in a newspaper. Those are the times where progress moved a little bit. And this time it's just more prevalent, where we're able to see it. When we can see it, when America can see itself and all of its ugliness, that's when things change. Because like you said, it's easy to take a blind eye and be like, "Oh, I didn't really know him," when you're reading it. But when you can see it, it's a different story.
We need churches, schools, even coaches on teams to help train staff and members on what various mental health struggles look like. The community can help one another. Identification can be a great first step in the recognition of PTSD and other conscious areas of mental health. As we moved along in this interview, we asked Nicole, how do we encourage others to recognize symptoms or to self-actualize some concerns that they may have?
I think the key would be to get a list of what PTSD what it looks like in simple terms, what this looks like in a person. And then when they can see it in black and white on paper, or in an article on Facebook or something, if they can see that written out and say, "Wow, I do that," or I felt that, or that happened to me, then maybe they'll be able to see themselves.
We realize that mental health in the African American community is affecting many of us, and we don't do anything to resolve it. However, medical professionals will also need to relearn about mental health, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. How you may take care of your white counterparts can't always be what you do for a black patient. We have some different needs that are based upon your people's systemic oppressions towards us. As one of my good friends said to me, don't be so busy seeing me, but you are not really seeing me.
I'm going to be a little bit repetitive here. We have to listen to learn, not to defend. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable. Understand what is triggering that discomfort. Sit in it. Not 1 hour, 2 hours. Sit in it, that discomfort, until you are learning from it. And then you can use it to navigate the rest of your relationships, any and all of your relationships. If you pay attention to that discomfort and how you're feeling and sit in that, you will be able to be genuine, empathetic, authentic with those that you're dealing with. And that goes for black with white, white with black, white with white, black with black. Not putting blame on any one party. If you can do that, it's going to make you a better person. It's going to create deeper relationships. It's going to create a sense of self that you can be proud of and not afraid of.
Thank you for all for tuning in to the second part of the first episode from Mental Health with special guest Nicole Sylvas. We thank her so much for sharing her words of wisdom with us and our audience, and we look forward to seeing her again on other episodes. You can continue the conversation and speak with myself or Ken or our producer Austin at KA Middle Society on Facebook, or you can go to Twitter at KA Society Median. And if you want to watch shows on a regular basis, you can also go to our YouTube channel, The Median Society, and you'll see our shows there as well. Don't hesitate to contact us. We look forward to seeing you again in the next episode of The Median Society. Thank you. We're out.